Hi, my name's Jack from the Juicy Bright Stuff. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the coffees we've got this month. So first of all, we've got an Ethiopian from Roundhill. It's from Nensebo washing station, which is in the south of Ethiopia, near the Bale Mountain. They take cherries from around 400 farmers around the area and they process them there. The coffee in this one is naturally processed. It's grown close to 2,000 metres above sea level. And the taste notes are floral, citrus and raspberry. With this one we really got delicate kind of floral flavours with a good kick of citrus as well. I'll talk a little bit about brewing this one a little bit later in the video. And the second coffee we've got is the Rwanda Gitesi Natural. It's from the Karongi region in Rwanda. Gitesi is the washing station. They take cherries and process them from around 1,800 farmers. But this coffee is from a farm that the Gitesi washing station owns itself. It's around 1,800 metres above sea level, and this is naturally processed as well. So both these coffees are naturally processed coffees. Processing is the process of removing the coffee cherry and the coffee bean. There's a couple of common ways to process coffee. Natural and washed are probably the most common two, and there is also some honey processed coffees you can get. They're a little bit more experimental. It's a little bit like a mixture between natural and washed. So I'll run through what natural and washed is really quickly, just to hopefully give you a bit of understanding. So in the natural process, the coffee cherry is picked. It's put on raised beds for around 15 to 20 days, with the cherry and the bean still attached, and then later the cherry is removed from the bean, and then it's dried and then shipped to us in its green form. The wash process, they remove the cherry from the bean as soon as it's been picked, normally, and then they ferment it in a vat of water. And what that does is it breaks down the sticky layer on the outside of the coffee called mucilage. And normally washed coffees are quite bright and clean. Natural coffees sometimes have like fermenty, boozy flavours because of the fruit fermenting. And also natural coffees are normally much sweeter than washed coffees. I recently learned a fun fact about natural coffees from the Barista Hustle article that I read. So I'd always been told that natural coffees are much sweeter because they're in contact with the cherry for a long period of time, meaning the sweetness from the cherry gets imparted into the coffee bean. But actually I learned that it's the other way around from them. So the washed coffee, when it's in the water, it actually starts the very first stages of the germination process, which is the process a seed goes through when it's turning into a new tree. Obviously it doesn't turn into a new tree, but it starts this process because it's in water. And for the very start of that process, the coffee uses some of its sugars in order to create energy to use to start that process. And that's why we often have less sugar in washed coffees than natural coffees. So I'm going to go ahead and brew up some coffee. So for this one is the Ethiopian one. I'm doing 15 grams of coffee in. I'm doing 250 out of this one. So I'm going to do about a 50 gram bloom, and then I'm going to let that sit for 40 seconds, and I'm going to pour up to 150, let it drain down, and then pour up to 250, and the total brew time's been around 3 minutes for this one. Awesome, so that's finished up at 2 minutes 55 seconds, which is pretty much bang on the brew time that we're aiming at with this coffee. I'm going to talk a little bit about brewing technique now with a v60. So the first part of the pour is called the bloom, and it's really important that we always do this. We recommend putting about 40 to 50 grams of water onto the coffee for the first part of the pour. And the purpose of the bloom is that when the coffee is roasted, it builds up lots of natural gases in the coffee. And if you were to pour the water straight in one go, the gases would block the water getting to parts of the coffee. So you might have one bit of coffee that's blocked by a bit of gas that only brews for 1 minute, and the rest might brew for 3 minutes. So you can have uneven extractions if you do it that way. So we always recommend doing a bloom. And then we've recently changed our technique as well. So I used to just do a bloom and then one pour, but I've recently changed to doing a bloom and then two pours. I have experimented with three pours as well, but two seems good for now. I've found that if I do a couple of pours rather than just one pour, the brews are much sweeter, much less muddy. I'm not 100% sure why this is, but my theory is that if you pour all the water in one go, the water raises really high up the v60, which means it has to find a path to get through quickly because it's heavier. So it goes down the outside of the v60 or finds the point of least resistance, and more water flows through one area of the coffee rather than another, which means you're going to have an uneven extraction because one part of the coffee is seeing more water than the other part of the coffee. So I wanted to talk a little bit about coffee extraction. I did recently write a blog on this, so feel free to read that on the website, but I thought I'd talk a little bit about it as well, just to try and help you get the best out of the coffee this month. And so when we drink coffee, what we're actually drinking is coffee that has been dissolved from the coffee that we started with into the water that we brewed with. And as the water comes into contact with the coffee, it dissolves coffee solids. And there's three different main areas of things that dissolve into the water. The first one is acids, and then sweetness, and then bitterness. And these are set in that order of the way they dissolve. So the first part of the brew, all the acids are going to dissolve, the second part, the sweetness, and then the third part, all of the bitterness. And this is the same for every brewing method. Espresso, AeroPress, Chemex, all of them is the same. So these same principles apply to all of the different brew methods. So the process of the water dissolving the solids from the coffee is called extraction, and we can adjust how much we extract by changing a couple of variables. So you might have heard people say this coffee was over extracted, this coffee was under extracted, this coffee was well extracted, and what we're aiming at is really the balance of the acids, the sweetness and the bitterness to get the best out of each coffee. And every coffee contains a different amount of acid, sweetness and bitterness, so we have to change how we brew each coffee to get the best out of it. So generally you would say under extracted coffee would be acidic, sharp, sour. Well extracted coffee would be a balance of acidity and sweetness. I don't generally like bitterness, so I try to stop brews before it gets to that, but over extracted coffee would be really bitter and might still have a little bit of sweetness, but it would taste very clouded by the bitterness. So I'm going to talk now about how to change extraction. So the main way that we do this first is by changing the grind size. And the grind size impacts the extraction in two ways. So if we were to have a really fine grind in a V60, there would be not very many gaps in between the coffee for the water to get through. So the water would flow through really slowly, and the increased contact time of the water and coffee would increase the amount of coffee that the water can dissolve and then increase our extraction. So the finer the grind, the slower the drawdown of water is going to be, and the more we're going to extract. Also, a finer grind, because it has more surface area, the water is going to find it easier to get around different bits of coffee and pull flavour from different bits of coffee. So it's also going to extract more because of the more surface area. For the coarser grind, the opposite's true. There's going to be more gaps in between the coffee, so the water's going to flow through faster, have less time to extract, so we're going to extract less flavour. And also with the coarser ground coffee, because we have less surface area, the water's going to have less coffee surface to pull flavour from, so we'll extract less because of that as well. So the grind size affects extraction in two ways. You can also change extraction by changing the brew ratio, and that's the ratio of coffee to water. Generally for a V60, we start with 15 grams of coffee in, 250 ml of water out. For all kind of filter methods, that's what I would personally start. But for an AeroPress, normally I would put 1 more gram of coffee in, so it's that 16 grams in, 250 out, because that just gets me closer to the point where I've enjoyed brews with an AeroPress. So how do we change coffee extraction with ratio? So if we were to take our 15 to 250 gram ratio and we change it to 15 to 270, what we're going to do then is push more water through the coffee, which is going to extract more flavour from the coffee. So we'd expect that coffee to be more extracted, so more sweet or more bitter, depending on where we started. And then the opposite opposite is true. So if we did 15 grams into 30 ml of water, then we would have less water contacting the coffee. So we would expect the coffee to be less extracted, more sour, more acidic. So I would recommend first of all playing with the grind size to change the extraction, because if you play with the ratio lots, you really change the strength of the coffee. So a 15 gram to 230 ml of water would be much stronger than 15 grams to 270 ml. And sometimes if coffee is particularly too strong, it's quite difficult to pick out the delicate flavours. So I always recommend playing with grind size first. For grind size, normally I aim for 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes for my first brew, and then I'll adjust and adapt that if necessary. For these two coffees, so for the Ethiopia, this was quite delicate, the floral and the citrus, so we brewed this at 15 grams to 250 ml, and we did a 3-minute brew time for this one. For the Rwanda, this one has kind of darker cherry, fruity, sweet kind of flavours, so we felt we were able to push the extraction a little bit higher on this one. So we did 15 grams in, 260 ml of water, and the brew time was 3.5 minutes to 3 minutes and 45 seconds. So we just pushed the extraction a little bit further on that one. So I want to talk a little bit about grind quality as well, because it's going to have a massive impact on the taste of the coffee that you're brewing. So all coffee grinders produce what we call fines, which is really fine particles of coffee, but generally lower end grinders produce more fines than premium coffee grinders. And what that's going to do to your brew, if you've got lots of fine particles, these coffee grounds are going to extract much quicker than the coarser grounds, so they're going to make the coffee taste a lot more bitter, and it's also going to reduce the clarity of the coffee that you're drinking, because you're going to have a lot of bitter flavour from the fines, and then you're going to have the nice sweet acidic bright flavours from the rest of the coffee, but they're kind of going to be clouded. So I'd recommend with your coffee grinder, you want to push the grind as fine as possible before you get those bitter flavours, and that may put a cap on how long your brew time can be. So I've got a niche stirrer grinder, which is quite a good quality grinder, so I find I can brew 3-4 minute v60s at the moment, and they're tasting quite good. Whereas on my old grinder, I would never really dream of going past 2.5 minutes, just because the grind quality wasn't there to enable me to extract that extra flavour from the coffee. So thank you so much for buying this month's subscription. I really hope this video has been helpful. I really hope you enjoyed the coffees as well. If you want to get in touch, I'll send you a link to the forum so you can put some comments on there, or you can email us, ring us, text us, whatever. We just want to help facilitate people talking and learning